like somebody to shoot the timekeeper. I think I'm most struck by Bill's refusal to deal with the historical alternative that I've given to his claim that God raised Jesus from the dead. Bill understands that the idea of God raising from the dead is completely rational, that it makes sense. The reason it's rational and makes sense to Bill is because he's a believer in God. And so, of course, God can act in the world. Why not? God does things all the time, and so there's nothing implausible at all about God raising Jesus from the dead. Well, that presupposes a belief in God. Historians can't presuppose belief in God. Historians can only work with what we've got here among us. People who are historians can be of any theological persuasion. They can be Buddhists, they can be Hindus, they can be Muslims, they can be Christians, they can be Jews, they can be agnostics, they can be atheists. And the theory behind the canons of historical research is that people of every persuasion can look at the evidence and draw the same conclusions. But Bill's hypothesis requires a person to believe in God. I don't object to that as a way of thinking. I object to that as a way of historical thinking, because it's not history, it's theology. Bill claims that the best explanation of his 4 facts is that there was a miracle that happened. Hume, in fact, was not talking about what I'm talking about. Hume was talking about the possibility of whether miracle happens. I'm not talking about whether miracle can happen. I don't accept Hume's argument that miracles can't happen. I'm asking, suppose miracles do happen. Can historians demonstrate it? No, they can't demonstrate it. If Bill wants to flash up his mathematical possibilities again, then I suggest that he plug in other historical options. For example, the one that I've already laid out that he's ignored, that possibly 2 of Jesus' family members stole the body, and that they were killed and thrown into a common tomb. It probably didn't happen, but it's more plausible than the explanation that God raised Jesus from the dead. Let me give you another explanation, just off the top of my head from last night, sitting around thinking about it. You know, we have traditions from Syriac Christianity that Jesus' brothers, who are mentioned in the Gospel of Mark, one of whom was named Jude, were particularly close to Jesus, and that one of these brothers, Jude, otherwise known as Judas Thomas, was Jesus' twin brother. Now, I'm not saying this is right, but that is what Syrian Christians thought in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, that Jesus had a twin brother. How can he have a twin brother? Well, I don't know how he can have a twin brother, but that's what the Syrian Christians said. In fact, we have interesting stories about Jesus and his twin brother in a book called The Acts of Thomas, in which Jesus and his twin brother are identical twins. They look just alike, and every now and then, Jesus comes down from heaven and confuses people. When they've just seen Thomas leave the room, there he is again, and they don't understand. Well, it's because it's his twin brother showing up. Suppose Jesus had a twin brother. Nothing implausible. People have twins. After Jesus' death, Judas Thomas, like all others connected with Jesus, went into hiding and he escaped from Judea. Some years later, one of Jesus' followers saw Judas Thomas at a distance and he thought it was Jesus. Others reported similar sightings. Word spread that Jesus was no longer dead. The body in the tomb by that time had decomposed beyond recognition. The story became more widely accepted that Jesus had been raised from the dead, and in the oral traditions, more stories started up to be told about the event, including stories about them discovering an empty tomb. That's an alternative explanation. It's highly unlikely. I don't buy it for a second. But it's more likely than the idea that God raised Jesus from the dead, because it doesn't appeal to the supernatural, which historians have no access to. Bill did not deal with the inconsistencies that I pointed out among our accounts. He simply said, well, earlier accounts are better than later accounts. If that's what he thinks, I want him to come clean and tell me. Does he think that the later accounts are inconsistent, and does he think there are errors in them? Yes or no? Bill admits that unembellished accounts are more likely to be historical accounts. If that's what he thinks, I want him to answer my question, yes or no. Does that mean that the embellished accounts of the Gospels are not historical? You see, he can't have it both ways. He can't say that unembellished accounts like Mark's burial scene are probably historical because they're unembellished, and then say that John's account, which is embellished, is also historical. If both embellished and unembellished accounts are equally historical, then the criterion has no weight that says that unembellished accounts are more likely to be historical. He asks, why would the women appear at the tomb? I made an argument for why Mark, or one of his community, may have invented the women. His response is, well, Mary Magdalene was a follower of Jesus. Well, Mary Magdalene's very popular these days, since everybody's read the Da Vinci Code, and if you haven't, it came out in paperback today. For the two of you who haven't read it yet. Well, yes, Mary Magdalene was a follower of Jesus. But his own argument was that nobody would invent the women because they were marginalized. Because men didn't think highly of women. My response is that's precisely why Mark would invent the tradition. Because in Mark's gospel, it's the marginalized who understand who Jesus is. It's not the male disciples. That's why you have the story of the women discovering the tomb. Bill claims that no first century Jew would doubt that the body was missing from the grave if Jesus appeared. My only suggestion is that he reads more first century Jewish sources, because it simply isn't true. I'll give you one. Read the second apocalypse of read the Coptic Apocalypse of Peter, a book that is thoroughly infused with Jewish views of the world, in which there is no doubt at all that the author understands that the body of Jesus was not located in just one place, but could be three places at once, and that the physical body wasn't the only body Jesus had, that he also had a phantasmal body. Bill, of course, didn't answer my questions, and maybe in the question-and-answer period he will do so. If he is claiming to be a historian using these sources as historical sources, I want to know, does he think there can be mistakes in them? If he doesn't think there can be mistakes in them, then I want to know how he can evaluate them as historical sources, as a critical historian. He claims that Honi the circle drawer and Hanina Mendoza and Apollonius of Tyana, by the way, are 3rd century people. They were not 3rd century people. They were people who lived in the days of Jesus. My final point is a very simple one. Even if we want to believe in the resurrection of Jesus, that belief is a theological belief. You can't prove the resurrection. It's not susceptible to historical evidence. It's faith. Believers believe it and take it on faith, and history cannot prove it.